Welcome back. Well, with Pervez Musharraf now gone from Pakistan's political arena, the days of a single strongman making decisions for the country are now, of course, over. On the international stage, his foreign policies were both praised and at times frowned upon. He was well known in the West as a key ally of Washington in President Bush's so-called war on terror. And closer to home, Pakistan's military took on al-Qaeda and pro-Taliban fighters along the Afghan border. India enjoyed some of its best diplomatic relations with Pakistan in decades under Musharraf, but the new civilian government is underpinned by a divided coalition which may not have the same goals or the same support Musharraf enjoyed from the army and the powerful intelligence service, the ISI. Well, the resignation of President Musharraf is likely to have an impact far beyond the region. In an interview with Al Jazeera's Shihab Ratansi, Pakistan's ambassador to the United States, Hussein Haqqani, said that US-Pakistani relations are now likely to take a different turn.
So does it really affect Washington's relationship with Pakistan on the war on terror?
The United States has realized that Pakistan is important in its own right, that their relationship needs to be with Pakistan, its people and its elected government. I think that the mistake that was made in the past of focusing on individuals is not a mistake that is being repeated in Washington right now. We saw that when Prime Minister Gilani came to Washington recently, President Bush, both presidential candidates, several leaders in Congress, everyone met him. And there is a desire in Washington, D.C. to try and understand the complexities of Pakistan and deal with them instead of putting their bets on one individual.
In the end, one of the major problems with US policy is they didn't get Pakistan. They don't understand the complexity. Many of those whose remit was to study these issues had no real contact with the country. Do you find that?
I think that there are always difficulties in understanding another culture, another country, and another nation's insecurities, problems, and issues. The United States has always looked at Pakistan through some specific prism. It was in the 50s the prism of the Cold War, in the 70s it was the prism of the war against the Soviet Union, and more recently it's been the prism of the war against terror. I think that there is a desire in Washington, D.C. to try and understand Pakistan in its own right, and I think that that desire is something that will bear fruit. Pakistanis and Americans need to understand each other's perspectives. Pakistan will remain engaged in the war against terror, albeit for its own reasons.
Well, still with us are our guests in Islamabad, Zaid Hamid, in Dubai, Javed Malik, and in New York, Andy Martin. Javed Malik in Dubai, let me start with you for this part of the programme. I mean, Pervez Musharraf was once the linchpin of Pakistan's alliance with the US on the war on terror, but with him now gone, I mean, how will Washington change the way it deals with Pakistan in the war?
Well, I would agree with what Ambassador Haqqani was saying earlier. I think the United States has realized that the relationship between Pakistan and itself would be much better served if it was between two democracies. Democracies in their nature, as you know, have the support of the people. The current government, for whatever mistakes that you may attribute to it, which I will say are just teething problems, is a government that represents its people. It is accountable to its people, and anything that it does, it will be accountable. So a relationship between democracies is more likely to be a long-lasting one. In this context, the visit of Prime Minister Gilani to America was very important, and he met with President Bush along with his administration, and he made it very clear that the policy in terms of the war on terror will continue. He has also outlined a three-pronged policy in which he has said that there will be a process of dialogue with those who have laid down their arms, and secondly, development in the region, and thirdly, if these two first objectives are not met, then the use of force. So ultimately, American interest and Pakistan interest is peace, and that is what this government is very well placed to achieve.
Okay, let's put that point to Zaid Hamid there in Islamabad, because what we do know is that Musharraf alienated a huge portion of the population in pursuit of Washington's approval and friendship. I mean, where do you see US-Pakistani relations going now, particularly with the war on terror?
You see, as far as war on terror is concerned, you need to break it down into two components, the political component and the military component. The military has taken up a massive security operation in the tribal areas at such scale, which has never been taken in the last 5 years of Musharraf rule. But in spite of that, the army is united, the army is behind the commander-in-chief, and they have inflicted some massive losses on the militants in the tribal areas. But as far as the government is concerned, I do not think the government will have any role whatsoever in the near future on the war on terror. For simple reason is they are not willing to discuss the issue in the parliament. They have not developed a national consensus on it. They are going to fight within each other like cats now over spoils. And fourthly, which is the most important point I feel, is that Just like Benazir was on the target list of the militants and they were successful in eliminating her, the same group of militants have released the lists of the government officials whom they feel are working for the American interest and would be targeted. And one of them is Mr. Asif Zardari himself. So I feel that for Mr. Zardari to play an active role in war against terror would actually be asking for too much of a trouble for himself, because he is himself a widower of this very campaign.
Okay.
So, but as far as the army is concerned, they are pretty focused.
Okay, let's just bring back Andy Martin into the debate here. Andy Martin, I want to just broaden out this issue of the war on terror and foreign policy because, okay, so Musharraf's now gone. What we know is that Pakistan's ruling coalition is doing peace deals with the insurgents in the tribal areas. But overall, how much of a policy headache is Pakistan for the US right now?
Well, I don't think Pakistan itself is a policy headache. I think the government recognizes that its long-term interests involves access to U.S. markets, the support of the United States government, people-to-people exchanges. President Musharraf was a very sophisticated handler of this relationship. It wasn't all one way. He received billions and billions of dollars in aid for Pakistan. He was on the world stage. And I would add that it is not a so-called war on terror. I was in New York on 9/11, and it's a real war to fight back against terrorists who are killing innocent civilians. But at the end of the day, this whole region, South Asia, is now becoming more and more important. The United States, just in the past few days, has developed an increasing foothold in Georgia. I'm doing some research now, and I'll have some columns later this week on how Putin has bungled the situation in the Caucasus. So we've got a new commander taking over, General Petraeus. He was very successful in Iraq. I think he's going to be very successful in looking at regional problems, developing regional relationships. I think Senator McCain, if he's elected, and I think he will be, is going to push for a practical, down-to-earth, common-sense approach. And the approach is going to be, let's work together where we can, and let's agree to disagree where we cannot. In the long-term interest, it's Pakistan's best approach to have a peaceful transition, to have honest discussions with its allies.
Okay, I want to just, because we're slightly running out of time, but I want to move the argument on and bring in the very important issue of India and bringing back Javed Malik into the debate. Just a quick question on India's reaction to Musharraf's resignation. I mean, we've seen a perceptible improvement in the tone and the diplomacy towards India, but I mean, is Pakistan likely, as many people seem to think, likely to be more hawkish now towards Delhi, particularly on the issue of Kashmir? Very briefly.
Absolutely not. Pakistan pursues a policy of peaceful dialogue with India. The foreign minister who has been appointed by this government has recently visited India. The Prime Minister of Pakistan has met the Prime Minister of India on the sidelines of the SAARC summit. So the resolve very much is there. You see, the people, the current government is the government of the people that represents the aspirations of the people. And the people of Pakistan want peace with all its neighbors. So naturally, the government policy will be conditioned through the will of the people. And that is to have peace with the region, including with India.
Okay, Zaid Hamid, a final question to you on India. I mean, how worried will the Indian government be about a weak and divided government if it exists in Pakistan? I mean, who perhaps might not be in a position to fully rein in the army and the intelligence services like the ISI. I mean, the ISI was recently accused of being behind the bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul. No, I'm just putting that question to Zaid Hamid.
Right.
Now, you see, for the Indians, I think they should be much more worried now. For the simple reason is that now Army will be doing things independently. Army has not associated itself with the politics. And if the government tries to tame the ISI or the Army, the relationship between the government and the ISI are going to be very tense. And if that happens, the control of the political government on the Army would not be that much as it was during the time of Musharraf, where unity of command meant that one person was controlling the political as well as the military side. So for this, with big backdrop, I think the Indians should be very concerned, especially when the Indians have increased the ante in Kashmir, and there's a massive rebellion building up in the occupied Kashmir. And Indians should be very worried because the emotions in Pakistan are now, sentiments are resonating with the rebellion inside Kashmir. And for the political government, it would be very difficult to distract itself from the happenings and developments inside the occupied Kashmir.
Okay, gentlemen, we've run out of time. We have to leave it there. Zaid Hamid in Islamabad, Andy Martin in New York, and Javed Malik there in Dubai. Thank you all very much indeed for your time. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We, of course, welcome your comments and your suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team here, goodbye for now.